I just got finished watching the coronation of King Charles III. God save the king, long may he reign. The service was very beautiful, and frankly, I found it very touching. I would recommend, even if you're not going to like physically watch it, just having it on in the background because it does have some of the most beautiful choral music I've ever heard, and the prayers are very lovely in it too. I'm actually kind of surprised how Christian the ceremony is. The majority of the ceremony is beseeching God, specifically Christ. They don't just censor it and just say God, to bless the king, that the king needs to follow Christ's example, to serve his people, to rule as a just father, and all that kind of thing. Some Catholics are kind of upset about the whole thing because part of it is him taking a vow to uphold the Protestant religion and the Church of England. As I've said, though, I mean, as bad as the Church of England is these days, I'd rather there be some acknowledgement of Christ and some commitment to Christianity rather than none. I personally would much rather live in a Protestant society as a Catholic than a secular society as a Catholic. But on the whole, it was very reverent, very Christian, and very lovely. It's kind of, I'm not sure if Anglican services have always been like this because I haven't really been one. I think maybe since I was like baptized back when I was born. I haven't been to one in years, but a lot of the service seemed extremely similar to a mass to the point where I was kind of instinctively giving responses as the Archbishop was reading out the liturgy, which is always kind of amusing. At the expense of being cringe, I find if I'm like watching something Star Wars and they say "the Force be with you," I kind of instinctually will say it with your spirit. But yeah, no, it was a very lovely service. I thought they were going to water it down. I thought there was going to be a lot more modernization of it than uh, what wound up happening. The only really kind of cringy part of it was they included some non-Christian faith leaders. Their role was at least minimal, and they just handed some of the regalia to King Charles III. Something I do appreciate is he did have the leaders of the various Christian denominations bless him, including the Catholic cardinal. A lot of people were upset about this, but I think it is a nice touch, and I appreciate him allowing the Catholic Church to participate in this. The church has long since accepted the Windsors as being the legitimate rulers of the British Isles, and you just have to kind of take the olive branch, and sometimes you have to take a gesture in the spirit in which it was extended. The truth of the matter is, England is a religiously diverse country, and it's hard to, at this point in time at least, to too strongly enforce any particular denomination of Christianity. It's a bit like the case with America, where America can't, like, as much as some people would want it to be, it can never really be a Catholic state, at least not in our lifetime. So I would be much happier if they just said America's a Christian nation, but we're not specifying a denomination. So I was happy to see the at least the apostolic churches, the Orthodox Church, the Catholic Church, um, represented there. So that was nice. It really touches me. So I guess kind of a bit about my background. I've talked about this in the past. According to my 23 and me, I'm overwhelmingly ethnically German. But on my father's side, we've my family has lived in England since the time of William the Conqueror. My great ancestor came over with William the Conqueror and lived in England. We can trace it back directly to there until my grandparents migrated over here. Sorry, my great grandparents migrated over here. I think it was during the 1920s. It was right after World War One. My father's side of the family was Anglican, even if they didn't really practice it. They did believe in God, believe in Jesus, and we're always very proud of the fact. And that's kind of the way I grew up. My grandfather was had a deep affection for the Queen and the Queen Mother. He loved the legacy of the British Empire. he always kind of viewed Canada as that was the defining characteristic of us, that if nothing else, we were loyal to the Queen and we were a Christian country. Like I said, he didn't go to church, he wasn't particularly devout, but that was how the identity worked. And that tends to be how I identify. I have a lot of pride and a lot of appreciation for my ancestors, who I generally tend to consider to be the English, to be the British monarch, to be the British Empire. I understand the British Empire did a lot of bad things. It spread liberalism throughout the world, but at the same time, it's a bit like even among hardcore legitimist like traditional French Catholics, they can't help but have affection for Napoleon because it was the time when their country was at its greatest. It was a time when all the world shook in terror before France and gave way before it. And similarly, the British Empire was the time when my people's influence were spread out all across the world. People in India were learning Shakespeare. It was a time of immense economic, scientific progress, of great culture. It was a time when the English language, and it still is, was spoken across the world, and the sun truly never set on the English Empire or British Empire. I guess it's a bit also like if you're Spanish, whatever issues you had with the Spanish Empire and the colonization of the Americas, it was a time period where nearly, or I don't know, a continent and a two-thirds of one continent and a third of another were conquered by your people, where your religion was spread there, your language was spread there, your culture was spread there. And because of the deeds done by the conquistadors and the successive Spanish generations, the Spanish language and the Spanish genetics, the Spanish blood, even if it's mixed with the Amerindian one, will continue on until the end of the world at this point in time. So it does harken back to that, and it does make me feel patriotic. And as a Canadian, I've always identified very strongly as an Anglo Canadian. And I've always wanted Canada, and I know this doesn't reflect it at all anymore. I've always seen us as being like the first daughter of the Empire, the most loyal of the Dominions. I do think, and I know it was probably never going to happen, it is sad that the Imperial Federation never happened, that there was some sort of real union or confederation between Canada, New Zealand, Australia, uh, obviously the British Isles, and I'd probably throw in Gibraltar, and why not Malta as well? They can also be part of it. And that we would have been united in a more tight union than what it wound up being. And we could be this great free English people together. But that was not to be. And just to see the sheer decay that all of us have suffered is really tragic. And maybe this sounds a bit 1984-ish, which is appropriate because we're talking about Britain, but in a lot of ways, hate is love. The fact that like, and this is true for a lot of like conservatives and like dissident right people who attack America constantly and attack Britain or hate Canada, it comes from a fact that Canada or Britain or America or France or what Germany or whatever the country is home. It's where your people, both the blood of your people, the culture of the people, the religion of the people, the language of your people originate. It's what built you as a person. And you miss, even if you didn't necessarily live during that time period, when that society was proud of itself, when it was at its zenith, when it had confidence in itself and its culture and was willing to assert it. And the fact that so many people, like in America, hate America and want to see it destroyed, or hate Britain and just say, like, just nuke Britain at this point in time, or just have the day of the rake and Canada gets occupied by the US. If you didn't care about it, if you didn't have strong feelings towards it, you wouldn't even take that position per se. Um, People are so upset about it and they have such a strong negative reaction because it is home. It's like when people say, well, Argent, why don't you just move to the South if you want to move somewhere conservative? I love the South. I love my Southern viewers, but it's not home. Canada is my home, and I don't really want to leave here. As bad as it is, as much as it hates me and people like me, it's still home. And it's very hard, especially if you're kind of like a cosmopolitan, to understand that sort of thing. Um, it's like some people will move to Eastern Europe because they want to live in a more ethnically homogenous, at least theoretically conservative society. But like, Poland isn't my home. Hungary isn't my home. Until recently, Ukraine isn't my home. My home is Canada, perhaps the United States, and perhaps Britain. I remember when I was in Britain, part of me said to myself, I wouldn't mind retiring here, going to Cornwall in the south of England and just living there cozily. That sounds like a pretty nice retirement. That sounds like a pretty nice life. And then I could travel around Europe and see all the things that my ancestors. So I did think it was nice. Um, Part of it, me, is very proud and very happy and feels a lot of affection. Another part of me feels immense sorrow for what we once had and what we've lost, and what at this point in time we'll probably never regain. At least not in our lifetimes. But someone said something to me recently which really stuck with me. They said, think of the early church and how many centuries they had to endure before their triumph. And maybe that's a cope and maybe that's false hope, and you can say what you will. But perhaps those of us who remain loyal to our countries, to our God, to our cultures, perhaps we will suffer a couple hundred years of persecution and darkness, and we will emerge stronger and purer from it, as did the early church. And we will regain what was once lost. Maybe, maybe not, but man cannot live without hope. Um, if you don't have hope, then you're just gonna basically off yourself. So, on that happy sort of note, I just want to say God bless everyone. Christ be with you, and God save the King. Long may he reign.